Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, a business podcast about revenue-generating partnerships, not a podcast about business time with friends. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hey, friends. Yeah. We are so pumped today because we have one of the most loved people in the partnership world, Miss Jessie Shipman, joining the show.
Oh, hey, friends.
Jessie
I don't get any of the benefits necessarily, but I'm happy to be here.
You create
the benefits are for all of us. We're all benefiting here. Yeah, it's a co-op of benefits.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I can't wait.
Awesome. How are you?
So
is
this
this our first time recording in the same
Look at
mountain time zone?
Oh, I know. Isn't that great?
I don't know.
I love
we've
it.
done
Like
the same time zone before.
It might be.
Well, have you guys have never done the same time zone, but when you were on Literal Scratch, we were in the same time zone, and I was like, how nice.
Yeah, even though it was
because when I asked
sunrise.
people, when I asked people on the West Coast, you're welcome. You are welcome. We just wanted you to see that beautiful alpenglow.
That's it. It's got it.
Hey, mountain people, they're a different breed, and we can appreciate them immensely. So
I got a perfect view of the bridgers right at my window, so I got to see a good sunrise.
I bet you did, lucky dog.
So. Anyway.
Okay, so people that, if you don't know Jessie Shipman, pause the episode, go follow her on LinkedIn because you're missing out. But for anybody who has been following her for any period of time, we all know that you, Jessie, are very keen on partner enablement. So much so that you started a company around it.
Indeed, I did. Yeah, it was one of those like itchy brain problems that I just could not resist scratching. Yeah.
Okay, so why? And how did you find that you're so passionate about partner enablement?
Yeah, so I think it really goes back to I have an education background, right? So I think education backgrounds are slightly unusual, like in the partnerships space.
Yeah.
Most people people get into tech sales from all kinds of different things. But I haven't met a ton of people who came from the education space who landed in partnerships. And so really how this
most of
whole
them fall
thing
in that
happened,
CS space.
Yeah, well, I find that they fall into that CS space like pretty easily. Teachers do. But like getting all the way into partnerships, like from like pivoting and then pivoting and then pivoting again. And so I loved being a teacher. I really did think that I would never be anything else. I loved every second of being in the classroom. I loved that I got to be creative. I loved that I got to integrate technology. And I taught at a private school, to be fair. So I really did have a lot more leeway than maybe some of the public school teachers. And I did all kinds of amazing things. I love my kids, and they are now doing amazing things themselves. I have, naval doctors and gold medal winners, like Olympic gold medalists. That's and amazing. Like all kinds of things that I just like treasures in my short span as a teacher. At any rate, I love education. I love teaching. I love thinking about how to change behaviors. I love thinking about cause and consequence. And so when I made my way into tech, I was still in that education space. I was a sales engineer for like Apple's K-12 division. And I loved that. And then they opened up this role, and the role, like literally the title was Technical Enablement Systems Engineer. And I was like, I don't even know what that means, but so I started like, I was like, okay, I'm a systems engineer now. Like, what is this technical enablement thing? So I started reading through the job description, and it was essentially like teaching other people or teaching other companies about the technical aspects of including Apple like in a sales cycle. And I was like, I'm passionate about Apple, deeply passionate about Apple. And I drank the Kool-Aid wholeheartedly. Uh, and then I was like, I get to go teach. Like, I get to do the teaching and the tech. Like, that is ideal.
Around something you're passionate about.
100%. And there was nothing mentioned in it that, oh, by the way, this is like a partnerships role. Because I was like, I didn't know partnerships was a career path. No idea. And so I get into it, and then there's sort of like, they divided our team up into these different channels. And I was like, what the heck is a channel? Right. So there's like the business channel, which is like CW, SHI, Insight, those kind of like actual sell to or sell through. And then there was the carrier channel, right? AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon. And then there was this like strategic partner channel, which was like brand new to Apple, that they had decided they were going to be an enterprise company and that we were going to go all in on strategic partnerships. Deloitte, Accenture, Cisco, Salesforce. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to solve the big, hairy problems that nobody understands or has done before. And my boss was amazing. And she was like, done, like, go do it. I have full faith and confidence that you will figure that shit out. And I was like, woohoo, right? Like, turns out that the
got the keys to the
entrepreneurial,
kingdom.
yeah, she was like, I don't know. And everybody else was like, we don't know. And I was like, great, I'll figure it out. And it turns out that like, it's my life's best work. Like, working with partners,
Amazing.
uncovering the things they need, solving problems internally in order to then like solve problems externally is like, ooh, it just gets I'm so weird. It gets my juices flowing. It makes me super excited. It has an element of like empathy. It has an element of creativity. It has an element of problem solving. It has an element of teaching and learning and behavior, and like all those things combined is just like what I was built to do.
How much of that ongoing like fire that you have now do you think originated from the fact that you were doing it from a brand you were passionate about? It's like there's a lot of people that are working for brands are just like, yeah, whatever, and they go to something else. But like, you found a brand you were passionate about, you found a role you were passionate about, and that propelled you into like where you're at now.
I mean, I think passion is a huge thing, but I think people can be passionate about all kinds of things. And like, my passion for Apple is like significantly like turned down since I left. But I think the fact that like I cared about the subject matter, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of I've heard like Scott. Do you all know who Scott Leese is? I really like Scott
We
Leese.
do.
And he's like obviously like so smart and has so many awesome things to say. And he kind of believes that like it doesn't matter what the brand is. It doesn't matter what you're selling. Like, if you're good at selling, you just go sell no matter what the thing is. And I think that I feel like I maybe take a little bit of a contrarian view on that now, because I think that in order to have the conversations you need to have from a personalized perspective, from a consultative perspective, from a solutions perspective, you kind of have to believe in the product that you're selling. It can't just be like this transactional thing anymore. And so I think that like, if I think that a great salesperson can sell a pen, right? But like, in this new sort of SaaS phase that we're in, where you really do have to get like a pretty granular, like, this is the problem we solve. We know you have this problem. Let us tell you why you have this problem. That you actually have to care about the thing that you're selling a little bit.
Yeah.
But I cared about the thing I was selling a lot of it because I saw tons of value in it, and wanted the whole world to know that I found it to be just like, why are you using a PC when you could use a Mac? Like, that's dumb. Do something different.
Watch the commercials. It's true.
It's
absolutely.
so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually having a conversation this morning where I was saying we were talking about like how hard it is to be like an enterprise software company and then to come down market, because people's expectations of software these days is my expectation of software as a Mac user is that it's like really easy to use. If I can't figure out what to do with something in the first like 30 seconds of logging in, you've lost me. I'm gone.
Too hard.
Right. If it's too hard. But enterprise, there's an expectation of enterprise software that it's too complicated, right? There's an expectation that you're going to have to pay $1 million to implement it. And if you don't have that, then you're not an enterprise. You're not selling into the enterprise. And I think that's actually one of the huge challenges that Apple is having, is that like it's so simple. It's not that complicated, but people are so used to complicated that they're wary of the simple.
Right.
At any rate,
is this right? Should it be this easy?
Yeah. If it's this easy, then it must not be valuable. Yeah.
Totally. Or there's not enough features, or it doesn't solve my problem adequately. One thing I thought was really interesting in how you just talked about how you've approached partnerships is it's super multifaceted, and it uses a lot of your different skill sets, which also happen to be passions for you. So win-win for you. But I don't know, totally. You said, I feel like this is my life's work. I feel like Jason and I would say the same thing now that we've fallen into partnerships and have been in it for a while.
Both reformer marketers. And I would challenge
former marketers, yeah. I would challenge people to look at their roles as such, like multifaceted. Even if you do report to the CRO and your only KPI is pipeline or closed win business, the venues and avenues in which you get there are very vast and do require a lot of different methods of thinking. And to Jessie's point, it can be teaching. It does require creativity, innovation, like all the things. So I love your approach there and kind of how it's not single threaded.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there just isn't any other sorry, go ahead. I blame Riverside. Go ahead, Jace.
No. I think that's a very common theme amongst like our podcast, especially like I feel like a broken record sometimes, and talking about like how the generalist is the best partner person, right? It's never single threaded. Like our job is, the partner person's job should be able to handle the enablement to the CS, to the marketing, to the product, to the sales, and make it relevant to the day-to-day that they do, and how to incorporate what you're doing into their daily activities. So it requires being able to juggle multiple balls and managing multiple threads.
Yeah, you're like you're like a quilter, right? Like you're kind of taking all of these like disparate pieces and sort of sewing them together in a way that creates like a beautiful, tapestry. And you're the thread and not the fabric, right? But without the fabric, without the thread, it's just a bunch of pieces. And so it's kind of like, I wonder, I don't know if y'all have been getting a lot of these questions too, just like randomly from folks who are like, I'm thinking about getting into partnerships. They're in sales or marketing, and they're like, yeah, I had this really great experience with a partner, and now I'm getting into partnerships. And, what I've been saying is sort of like, why don't you just stay in sales and use partners? Like, why don't you just talk to your partner person and figure out how to work with them instead of trying to work work alongside them instead of trying to become them. Like, you're going to be far more successful in that way. Y'all keep having that conversation.
That's not bad feedback. Yeah. Oh yeah. Most of my coffee chats that I do, I'm going to say most, a lot of my coffee chats that I do are salespeople that want to make the jump into partnerships. So it's kind of like, what's the natural next move? It's like, well, you can take a step back and be a partner account manager. You can go find somewhere that has partner sales managers, but you're just going to be a seller at the end of the day. So like, what's the difference? You can do it under the guise and with the connections of, the partners, or you stay as an AE, to your point, which is not a bad take. But yeah, I hear that quite a bit. And I think,
and you get commission as an AE.
Right. True. And if you use a partner, you're likely going to hit and exceed quota every single time.
Exactly.
And because you're in the sales organization, you're at very low risk of getting cut in a riff, particularly if you're hitting your quota and exceeding it every time because you've figured out partnerships. And I'm just like, this is and that I feel like is, again, that we sort of talked about this before we started recording, but like, this is the disconnect between like revenue and revenue functions and partnerships. And I'm like, we have to keep having the conversation with revenue people so they understand that like, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help you.
Right. Mm-hmm. We're trying to set you up.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of those conversations.
I read your bio. I love this bio. Like, first of all, you talked about it, but prior to this, I had no idea that you were a history teacher. So we should talk about history at a different time. But
Okay.
Podcast spinoff.
I love that. So you quote unquote, I learned how to find the right relationships within an organization. I learned how to ask the right questions, and I learned how to establish a symbiotic relationship. So
Ooh, I said symbiotic in my bio. I gotta go, and I hate that word.
Very smart.
Did ChatGPT write that?
No, this was pre-chat. I haven't even looked at it in probably over a year. So I'm glad it's awesome, but I don't know why symbiotic was in there. I hate that word. Anyway, carry on.
Seasons of life.
Okay, well, I think kind of your progression here, like, that's it. That is the roadmap to building successful partnerships. But there is so much to uncover in that one statement. You start every part of it with, I learned. So from your experience, and maybe if you could mentor somebody who's new to this partnership world, how does one find the right relationships and learn how to ask the right questions and further establish a symbiotic relationship?
Yeah. Oh man, finding the right person. You know, I feel like I've always just been really good at being able to like walk into a room of strangers and start finding people that I can jive with, right? And like I can just like kick up a conversation and know whether it's going to go somewhere in like the first 30 seconds, right? And if it doesn't go anywhere, like I know I haven't hit the right person. But I think what I learned is like, okay, if it does go somewhere and I've created this relationship, like for me, it's just all about relationship. So I've created this relationship, but they're not the right person to get the goal accomplished. Like they're going to know at least somebody to point me in the right direction. So I think it's figuring out what the right place and time is. I think we talked about this a little bit too when we were talking about Pavilion of like, what's the right place and time? Like, am I in a room of people who can help me to accomplish a goal? Or am I in a room of people who just are a room of people? Like, I gotta select my audience a little bit carefully. And then once I've selected the audience carefully, then it's a matter of like, hey, how can I help? Right? And then they can be like, how can I help? Well, I'm looking to do X, Y, and Z. Do you know somebody who can help me? Yeah. Oh, let me connect you with this person. And then it's just on and down the chain. But it always starts with how can I help? Right? Like what can I do? What's missing for you? What's missing? Is there a gap that I can fill? And if I can't fill it, let me see if I can find somebody who can.
Exactly.
I love that. I also think what you just said too is knowing how to ask for help or knowing what your ask is in return. I feel like, speaking for a friend, I suck at that part of like, how can I help you? I'll do whatever. And then it's reciprocal. I'm like, I'm fine.
Yeah. Do you all hate that question when people are like, how can I help? And you're like, I always draw a blank. I
appreciate it. My go-to lately has just been like, can you go leave us a review on the podcast? I've got nothing. I don't know what else to say.
Hey, that's a good one. Yeah, can you just go download the podcast? Because I'm tired of seeing the number 12.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Antonio. It's always Antonio. Antonio, I think, downloads it from like 12 different IPs.
Praise
he might be the
Antonio.
Praise to Antonio.
Love that guy. Keeping all our numbers up. Single-handedly.
Woo! Yeah, so that actually is a good ask. Like, hey, why could you just go listen to my podcast? But I've actually just been returning the question to people, like when they say, "How can I help?" and I'm like, "Well, how do you think you can help?" That's been my new go-to. Like, what do you think I might need? Because sometimes I'm in the weeds, right? As particularly as a founder. I'm just in the weeds. I need all kinds of shit. I don't know. I need $1 million. I need,
support me on Patreon.
Wouldn't that, I should have a Patreon account.
That's
you know, can you go, is there, I guess I should start asking, I'm just like thinking through this as you're asking this, but like, I guess what I should start asking is like, do you know anybody who can use my software? And would you be able to
why not?
introduce them to me? And I feel like that's a thing that people ask all the time, but I also feel sleazy about it. I don't know. There's something about that just makes, I know it works, and I know
Who
people
needs
want to help.
enablement?
And that's literally partnerships.
Yeah. So just a matter, and I know, like, over and over again, I've heard that, like, oh yeah, I just ask, like, if they're not interested, I just ask, you know, if they have 5 other people that might be. So, but yeah, I'm a software founder. What I need is customers. Like, that's what I need, guys.
Exactly. So going back to like just finding the right relationship, and I just wanted to finish this talk with this part. I was on one of my coffee chats the other day, and someone kind of flipped the finding the right partner question on me, and they were like, "Well, how did you know it was the right relationship when you met Sam?" I'm like, "Oh, that's a really good question. That's a good take." And they're like, how'd you guys meet? And how'd you talk to me about how you knew like she was the right one? And
This
then
is my
like
first time hearing about this too.
this just happened
What'd
this
you
week.
say?
And like
What'd you say,
in my
Chase?
so yeah,
All
so,
yours.
when we met, I'd gone through some to make it relevant to the conversation, some self-enablement to make sure that I was in the right place to meet the right person. And in my over-analytical mind, I had kind of like this checklist of what the right partner is going to look like. I'm trying to make this as like relevant to the partnership talk as possible, guys.
I can't wait to tell you my take
but
on
for
this,
real,
so carry on. Yeah.
But for real, I had a list in my head of what this person is going to look like, or not look like, but actually what they're going to be like. Sam and I had met at a networking event in town. Seen each other.
IPP.
Yeah, my ideal person profile.
This could go in so many directions, but carry on.
we sat down to dinner, and we started having these conversations, and I'm asking a lot of questions and guiding conversations like, okay, she's cool. Let's start going down this checklist of things, and where does she fall into the mix? And it was a perfect score of 100, maybe 99.9 on the scale, but it was a perfect 100. And I was like, okay, well, this is the person. And so we continued to talk. Went out later that night, and then 39 days later, I was like, hey, this is crazy, but I love you. So
can you sign my partner agreement?
Yeah. 39 days later, I dropped the big L word, and she was like, "Oh, you're crazy." But
how long until you were engaged? From meeting to engaged. Okay. Is it okay if I give you
after that? So.
Yeah. Is it cool if I tell you like my take on this?
Absolutely.
All right. So I was probably in the right place to meet the right person, like a physical group of people to meet the right person, but that was like not the thing that was on my mind. But it was for sure on Tony's mind. And so
probably the same on the side.
He probably had some sort of IPP checklist as well, that clearly I checked the boxes for. But because I was not in search of directly a partnership at that point, he was going after a partnership agreement, and I was oblivious. Completely oblivious, to the point of like we went on a date. Amazing. And I didn't know we were on a date, and he had orchestrated the whole thing.
You were account mapping and you didn't know.
I had no enablement. So what's so funny though, like just to bring it back, like my brother and my sister-in-law, because Tony and I were friends. He thought we were more than that. I had no idea. And he was hanging out we were bowling with my brother and my sister-in-law. And afterwards he left, and my brother and my sister-in-law were like, "What's up with Tony?" And I was like, "What do you mean?"
What do you mean?
What do you mean? And they were like, "That dude likes you. Like, there's a there." And I was like, "Oh man, I didn't even see it."
Totally missed it.
But as soon as I was enabled, then I was like, oh yeah, I like that guy. I like that guy.
Enablement opened your eyes.
Yeah, 100%. And then I was like, okay, let's do this, right? And then it was like holding hands, and then it was like a little kiss, and then we were engaged and married. So like, and you took 39 days to say I love you. We were engaged in 3 months, and then we got married 5 months after that.
That's some serious enablement, Tony.
That was yeah. Well done, Jake and Jen. That's some amazing enablement. He didn't even he was doing like subliminal partner enablement because he just was like a good person to my family, and then they were like, "Yo,
yeah,
open your eyes."
That real 90-day path to value.
Yeah,
Jason
that was
pulled the same subliminal stuff with me.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, like wooing
Sam didn't know she was looking
something. Either. Yeah. Oh, really? Well done. Well done, Yarby.
Really, no. Yeah.
So yeah,
right.
I feel like those are very good corollaries. Great choice. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I was like, you know what? This is a really good question, and I appreciate the flip on that, and I can see where you're asking from, and it was a fun walkthrough, to say the least. So
yeah, what's super interesting for me is that I actually, when I was doing in partnerships at Apple for like the very first time, I went back to my marriage as a framework for how to create business partnerships. I was like, what is we've been married for almost 18 years at this point. And so like, at that point I was married for almost a decade. And so I was going back to like, what is it that I expect from my partner, my life partner? Like, what is the things that I expect? How do I get those things? How do I contribute? Is it more about giving? Is it more about receiving? Like, what's the balance? And I was looking at that as an example for how to create business partnerships, because in the end, it's all just relationships. Some are obviously more consequential than others. But the reality is like when I looked at the business partnerships and what I was trying to accomplish with Salesforce, that if I looked through it through the lens of my marriage, that I was able to like see things more empathetically. I was able to ask important questions. And I was able to curate those relationships in a way that truthfully they told me they'd never been asked before. I couldn't even believe it when he told me that. When I went to them and was like, can you just tell me about like your internal enablement structure? I want to make sure that we're like fitting in instead of like overlapping, or like being an overlord. Like, how can I help? Like, where can we contribute? What pieces and value gaps are missing that we can sort of put into there? And he was like, literally no partner has ever asked us these questions before. And I was like, shit. Sorry, man. Like, let me just, you need a hug?
All you gotta do is make the ask.
How awful. So yeah, it's a fascinating way to look at partnerships for sure.
So riding on that, let's look at the LTR of enablement, the long-term relationship, if I may. We love a good acronym on the show here. So if you really nail the enablement part of the equation, what lasting impact does that have in securing and maintaining this long-term relationship with your partner? So get the enablement right. How does that tie into building a long-term relationship?
So enablement isn't training and isn't only training and certification, right? And I think a lot of people sort of miss that enablement, when they hear enablement, what they think is training and certification, right? So like, where are my one-pagers and where are my decks and when is the next lunch and learn and can people get a certification and how do they do that and where's my portal? Like, that's the spiral that people frequently go down when they hear partner enablement. But the reality is that partner enablement is the environment in which your partners can change their behavior around how they interact with you. And so that is a long-term relationship. That is not a one and done. It is not an onboarding. That like the actual like curation of relationships between partner managers, the curation of relationships between salespeople and partner managers, between salespeople and salespeople, and like how all of that ebbs and flows throughout the partner relationship. All of that is enablement, right? It's not just
Absolutely.
training and certification. And so, like, if anything is the long-term play in a partnership relationship, it's enablement. It's the only thing that fosters the relationship from beginning through maturity.
That's so good. How have you or are you coaching people to kind of foster that environment, or to actually build that environment to support that motion of curation?
So I think
And
number
that
one is,
motion of change management. I mean, like, that's a
yeah.
huge undertaking.
Yeah. So first things first is like, is this a meaningful partnership or is this a vanity partnership? Right? Like, if we scope all the way back out to like, what are we creating this partnership for? Now, like in my case at Apple, there was no convincing someone that the partnership with Salesforce maybe wasn't the best choice in partnerships, right? Like, that was a partnership that was created between Mark and Tim on stage at Dreamforce, and there was nobody who was going to say like, this is a bad idea. It was pretty much just like, they said you're going to do this, and so make it work. And so, and I think that there was value there, but we had to try really hard to extrude what that value was. And so for other companies who are maybe starting and thinking about like, what is my long-term play here? Like, let's make sure that we're not creating a bunch of vanity partnerships. Like, let's create partnerships with substance. Because if you have partnerships with substance where each of you is filling a mutual gap, then creating a better together story is much easier. Once you've created a better together story, then you can simplify that better together story in like a very simple message that can be then disseminated across an entire organization to help them really understand like what the value is. Once you sort of have that message, then it's about like awareness, and then from awareness to this, more substantive content that helps people to accomplish things, accomplish those customer solutions. They know where to find it. Like, I tell people all the time that like, the content doesn't matter until people care about what you do or know about what you do. Like, everybody knows that if you create a one pager and you put it in a portal or send it in an email, that nobody gives a shit. Nobody is looking at your one pager. They don't read their own one pagers. Like, and when was the last time you read a one pager? Like, that should be your litmus test for whether you should build or send one, is the last time you read one.
Right.
And yet this is still the table stakes of partner enablement is the one pager. And people will buy whole PRM systems that allow them to like co-market a one pager, which is just so fascinating.
It's just a fancy storage unit for it.
100%. Anyway, I digress. So the whole point though is like, let's create substantive partnerships where we're filling mutual gaps, and then let's take that like really concrete better together story and weave it into awareness and start with awareness. Like, if you look at my LinkedIn, like, the tagline is partner awareness is the first step in partner enablement. Like, don't get ahead of yourself and start creating all of it. If you don't have awesome partnerships to begin with, or you're just getting started, or you're onboarding a new partner, like, don't start with a certification. Start with awareness. Do they know what you do, and can they articulate it simply when a customer needs it?
Yeah.
And I think you're spot on there too, because the awareness.
Nope.
No, I think it's fantastic. I also think that the awareness spans outside of that partner to partner. And you talk about this, so I want you to expand on this. But like, it's one thing. Do your sales teams even know who your partners are? Maybe not. And then one step further, do they know the WIFM of what's in it for me from the sales perspective? Like, 100%. Enablement is so, I'm going to use this word again, multi-threaded, because it's not just like, do my partners know about me? It's, does my sales team know about my partners? Does my CS team know about my partners? And the amount of enablement that's required for a successful partnership is astounding. And I feel like it's absolutely a second, third, fourth thought for partner teams, when really without it, you have nothing.
Yeah, I think the reason for that again is that most partner teams do not approach enablement from a perspective of behavior change. They approach it from a content and training perspective, right? And so that's why it kind of gets pushed down the aisle, because what they're not recognizing is that all of what they're doing to create the awareness and to create the partnership and create the relationships is also part of the enablement process, right? Because if we define enablement as the environment in which people can change their behavior, then all of the things that you're doing up to that point that you've already forgotten about is also enablement. And then if you start thinking about it from that perspective, then you can actually start strategizing around it, rather than it just being sort of like fits and starts of like behavior, like internal behavior or partner manager behavior. You can actually start thinking about it from like what's the process of this? What have I actually done? Like in a successful partnership, like let's unpack all of the pieces that I've done so that I can go back and be like, oh, this was where it was successful. This is where it was successful. Let's make that a minimum viable process, right? And then once we've created a minimum viable process, then we can create a program around those minimum viable processes. But most people aren't thinking about all of the things they've done as soon, like even before you sign the partnership agreement, even still has some things to do with enablement. And that's part of that like long-term journey and the ebbs and flows of like, but most people don't think about all of those things as, the way that you change
That's
your
such a
partner's
great
behavior.
way of looking at it. It's like in my head now, I'm going through like all the work we did at Drift as an example. It's like it was all changing behavior and changing minds about how they work with partners. They all just kind of, partner team's going to go handle that. And I'm like, well, that's wrong. I'm not going to be your glorified BDR.
Yeah.
You're going to help me with this. And it's like, it's been 6 months just trying to change minds about how they work with partners. And then once they were like, well, okay, maybe, then we begin to build process into how they began to work with partners. And once we like built a system around it, then it actually literally began to scale.
Right. And the WIFM is a huge part of that,
change.
right? Like to your point, Sam, like 100%. The WIFM is a huge part. The incentives are critical to enablement. Like if you have no incentives, you really don't have any way to change behavior, right? Because have you ever heard of this concept of the elephant and the rider? Is this a familiar concept to you by chance?
Tell it to us.
It sounds familiar. Remind me.
I don't know it.
So like every person has an elephant and a rider, and like your conscious behavior is the rider, but your emotions are the elephant. And every like motivation is usually driven by your elephant, right? And the whole point of making it an elephant is that like if an elephant decides to go in a particular direction, and like there's no chance that the rider is changing that, right? Unless you've trained the elephant to listen to the rider, right? But most people's elephants are not trained. And so they only do what is emotionally motivating. And so like if you don't have a what's in it for me, if you aren't tapping into people's emotions, if you aren't tapping into their elephants, you are much less likely to change their behavior. And so like we think a ton about like the partner to partner incentive. Well, your company is going to get 20% of this deal. And that 20% means almost nothing to that other company.
Right.
But if we were thinking about this from an elephant perspective, we would be thinking about what is the behavior I'm trying to change in my partner. And if that behavior is co-sell behavior, if that behavior is referral behavior, if that were like, there needs to be a very clear, like, this is why you should be motivated to do this from a personal perspective. And we don't spend nearly enough time on that.
What have you seen work in that capacity?
Solving a customer problem to get to a higher win rate, right? Like faster time to close, increased ACV, faster win rate, closing more deals and getting to quota. And
I like that all of that is incentivized around like their actual KPIs and work, and not like spiffs and stuff like that, because I've also never really seen spiffs work.
They don't work. Yep. They're table stakes,
and I think taking all of that, like ACV and whatnot, that's great from a company perspective, but maybe even dialing down a step further to Jason's point of like, and here's what this means for you and your quota, which ultimately 100%. Means a promotion, more money in your pocket, whatever.
Right. But in order to be able to have that conversation, you have to know how that your partner's internal KPIs work. Right. And not a lot of people are
means you have to
asking that
ask.
question. Yeah. They're just not asking. Like, tell me about how your sales team closes quota. What are your quarterly KPIs? Not your quarterly KPIs. What are their quarterly KPIs? What are the unit economics? Are you trying to get to rule of 40? Are you trying to get to cash flow positive? Are you trying to get to profitability? Or are you just trying to get to the next big valuation? And does that matter to each of the individual, like to the revenue organization? And I think if you ask the partner organization those kinds of questions, they would look at you dumbfounded. Right? They wouldn't know.
Most wouldn't know.
Because nobody's sharing that information with them, and they're also not asking that question. And so it's
a
sort
good
of
practice
like
for them, though.
Oh, it's a huge practice for them, right? Like, come back and tell me what those. You go ask that question internally, and then come back and tell me, and like we could probably figure out how to help you have that impact, right?
That's it.
And so it's
I'm a
like,
big,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm a big fan of mutual action plans and establishing those out the gate with partners, and within that, building out an executive summary that kind of outlines everything of who the partner is, what you do, down to like what's your ARR goals for the year as a company. How does that break down to partners? How does that break down to this partnership? Like, what are we looking at here from like ACV, and like really understanding their business so that I can inject as much value as I can back in that business. And every time I've done that with a partner, starting from my time at Terminus to Drift, everyone's like, oh, well, you actually care. You actually give a shit. Okay. You're going to help me get to this number? How? Cool. Now we go to the next page. Let's look at our go-to-market plan. That's how we're going to do it. And we'll save the best for last. We'll look at some accounts we can help do this with and build some sort of grid about how we can get to those accounts. But first, I got to understand
100%.
like what we're trying to accomplish together here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all like the trust that you foster just by asking those questions and trying to get to how you can help them accomplish their goals is the foundation of enablement. Nobody learns when they don't feel safe. And if you haven't established or created trust through those, like, here's how we're going to mutually benefit one another, and here's what I'm committing to on paper, you sort of don't even have anything to stand on when it comes to enablement, no matter what you're trying, because nobody trusts you.
Man,
yeah.
I just had to write that down, by the way. Nobody learns when you don't feel safe. That's gold. I'm going to put that in a fortune cookie.
Nice. Don't put it in a fortune cookie. Somebody will throw it away. You got to put it on like a plaque and like hang it above your head.
Oh, boy.
I would say the other side to that too is nobody commits. So you're not going to learn and you're not going to commit to the partnership. And so I think you're spot on. And also, I feel like we talked about this, but a lot of partner people are uncomfortable discussing those numbers, even internally with their own orgs. And so that's certainly something that people need to like get comfy with, know the numbers. Like, I have a freaking art degree, people. Funnel math is not where I thought I would spend my time. But once you understand the breakdown and how like your program can really, really make an impact on the bottom line of your business, it becomes a lot more interesting. And you can be extremely effective in those conversations internally, externally with your executive team. It's a crucial thing that most people don't look into.
Yeah, I think anybody who's starting in a partner executive position for the very first time should be in their first 30 or 60 days taking a course on unit economics. There's just no way to be able to have a seat at the table if you can't understand like the unit economics that are important to your business, that are important to your CEO. And just being able to have that conversation allows for you to advocate for yourself, because you're going to be able to say like, I understand that partner qualified leads allow for this conversion rate, right? That we're able to take a partner qualified lead and get them to a qualified opportunity in half the time as a marketing only qualified lead, right? And if you can have that conversation about like, here's how we're moving you down the bow tie, and here's how quickly we're doing it, you can have every seat at the table you want. But if you're just sort of sitting there at the whims of everybody else who's having that conversation, like, number one, you're the first on the chopping block. And number two, you're never going to get the resources you need to be a partner team that scales. And I think that's where everybody kind of gets shut down, is like the scale. Yep.
That's it. So to that point, just thought about this. Here's a free tip for anybody that might be listening to understand better about how your CFO or CRO thinks. I did this at Drift, and it was great. It was like when I first started, I went and searched the CRO and the CFO for all the podcasts they had been on, because I want to learn how they thought, especially the CFO, who was kind of a locked box at times. But if you go find him on a podcast, he's talking about all the ways he thinks about revenue, CAC, and everything else. And I began to listen to Jim and all these podcasts. I'm like, I got you now. I understand how you're thinking. I understand what's important to you. I understand how to talk to you. Then you go do the same thing for your CRO and find out all the places he's talking about what he believes to be true. And you can get a gold mine of information about how to actually talk and relate to these people in your company.
Yeah, people love to talk about themselves on podcasts.
They really do, yeah. That's why we started one.
We're out here just telling our love story.
I'm into it, yeah.
I just wanted to record some fun conversations, That's all we started this for.
100%.
So let's talk about something real quick. You posted the other day, and I almost sent you a text to see if you wanted to jam on a call or something, because I want to hear more about these hundreds of partner professionals that you've been talking to over the last 18 months. And you said that less than 1% felt like they had a good handle on enablement.
Yeah.
You laid out some good tactics about how to overcome that, but why in those conversations do you think that number is so low?
I really think that I'm on a mission to civilize. Have you ever seen the show The Newsroom on HBO?
No, familiar with it, but have not seen it. No.
If you get a chance to watch it, it's very, very good. But one of the characters is they're trying to change the way news is done. Right. So they feel like corporate news has sort of, I swear I have a point in this. They feel like corporate news has been taken over by essentially advertisers, and that the American public, the American electorate deserves to have the information as it exists and not as it's twisted in order to be able to get the ratings that cable news needs, right? And so they're turning this nightly newscast that was sort of milquetoast into this we're just going to give it to you straight. We're going to do the news is what they say, right? And so the anchor of this show is an incredibly charismatic person, and he's in his office talking to his boss, and he's like, I'm on a mission to civilize, right? So he's so passionate about bringing the news back to news. And it no longer being entertainment, but it being a way for people to get the information they need so they can be informed when they go into the voting booth. And so I kind of feel like I'm on a mission to civilize about this concept of enablement. I think most people shy away from enablement because they are unfamiliar with how to change behavior. They don't understand the learning practice and behavior practice concepts that allow them to think like a teacher. And so they do, most people who are working for survival in most cases, right, is I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, usually based on the experience that I've had in the past. And so that experience is they have to be able to find some kind of information. I don't know how to get it to them. I don't know what actually drives behavior change. I didn't know behavior change was the thing that I was supposed to be doing. There's just so many unknowns, and it's been done poorly for so long that people are just well, that's the way it's always been done. And quite frankly, there are a bajillion problems that could be solved in partnerships, right? To your point of it's so multifaceted, and there are so many problems in it right now. It's not necessarily repeatable. It's not necessarily scalable. It's very difficult to execute on well. And only a handful of companies can say that they've done it well, right? And so most people are sort of we think we need this. It seems obvious that we do. We have no idea how to execute on it, just from a general partnerships perspective. And when you kind of tear it down into its pieces, and partner enablement is only just a piece of it, they're sort of I'll deal with that later. So I think that's why that's
Mhm.
sort of the one that it's a very small percentage. They feel like they have a good handle on it because they don't feel like they have a good handle on any of it.
So what's the implication to the 99% that are getting it wrong or don't feel like they have a good handle on it?
I think it's just get started, right? Like the things that you're doing, and I think we've already said this, and maybe we're beating a dead horse here, but like you're already doing enablement. The things that you're doing are already enablement. So like go look at what is successful, figure out what the process is that made it successful, and then turn it into a program. Try it again with another, like try that process again with another partner. Did it work? How do you tweak it? Because there are things that you're doing to help change the behaviors around your partners, or maybe that you aren't. And maybe looking internally, how are you changing their behavior internally around a new product or a new go-to-market motion? Like talk to your internal enablement team about how they do it internally, and then see if you could turn some of those things into practices and partnerships. Like there are things that you're already doing with partners that are the process of enablement, and it's just a matter of like creating program around it.
I think you said something good there too. Like, go talk to your internal enablement team if you have one. If you don't understand like how to codify that whole thing, right? Go talk to them, and they'll tell you exactly like what they're doing internally, what's working. Probably even give you the playbooks they're putting together, and all you've got to do is just kind of insert yourself, where it makes sense for partners. That's just an easy lift to get it up and going. Then you kind of figure it out for yourself. But you definitely want to build some process around it, build something that makes sense, and kind of use something I've been saying for a long time now is incorporate it into their daily activity. Like that's, I think, the most imperative piece of it.
So, Jesse, for somebody who, for the majority of us who did not come from a teaching background, and behavioral change is not something that we expected to be a part of our role, are there any like go-to resources that you're like, oh my God, this book changed my perspective on behavioral change,
Good
or
question.
this person's a tremendous thought leader? Where should we go to learn more about this?
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. Design for How People Learn is a great book. If you don't have it and you're in partnerships, you have to get this book because it's applicable across your enablement content. It's applicable across your the way that you would form your partnerships. Like it's called Design for How People Learn. It talks about creating and crafting the right audience and tailoring your message to the audience. It will help you build better together stories. It's an amazing resource, and it absolutely changed my perspective on things. So Design for How People Learn is what it's called. And
Noted.
then Nancy Duarte, 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 has written 3 books. So she is the every time you watch an Apple keynote, so like for a new product introduction, every keynote that Apple has was created by Duarte. That's her consulting firm.
That's
But
fun.
she has 3 books, three books, Slideology, Resonate, and oh no, there's the third one. You could just Google it. I'm trying to think of what it.
Book number 3.
Use the internet.
Yeah, book number 3. Slideology is the first one though, and this is like, Design Story. That's what it's called. So it's using data to tell a story. So if your like if the thing that you're doing when you go to a partner is like only pitching your speeds and feeds, only talking about how awesome you are, and you're essentially pitching them instead of talking about what you can bring to them, you're doing it wrong. Stop talking about yourself and use data to talk about what you've done for others. And so Slideology helps you to use the data that you have from other partnerships potentially, or like or even if you don't have some data from other partnerships, like it helps you to say like, here's the research that we've done into the ecosystem. Here's where we think you have a value gap. Here's where we have that, or we fill that gap. And here's how I think we can go to market together so that you can achieve X, Y, and Z. And you should have collected all that data about the partner that you're going after, so that you can then tell that story and tell a narrative through the data that you've collected. And her whole methodology around that changed how I build content and changed how I talk to partners and people.
Okay.
We got some reading to
Outstanding.
do.
Yeah. Even though we're recording, I still wrote those down.
So did I.
Well,
They
now you
also
have it
work in
written
our
down
Kindle library,
twice.
Jake.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we share a
Some
Kindle
bookshelf.
library, so we got to delegate who's purchasing what.
Oh, so these 4 books you want to purchase in paper
So that you
because
can
they're not
read.
they're not like chapter books. They're reference books with lots of like rich
Exercise books.
pictures and exercises
Okay.
and like
Picture
things
book,
that you should
finally.
be going through and
A
highlighting
book I can
and that
read.
sort of thing.
Okay, Jessie, I'm like, my mind is going a million miles an hour. But to wrap this, because we're coming up on time and I want to be respectful of yours, we always close with a unrelated question. So, for 2024, what is one of your personal goals that you are working towards?
I'm trying to get paid, Sam. In 2024.
I love it.
I want to be able to, at the end of 2024, I want to be paying myself a salary through my software company. It doesn't have to be a
Awesome.
huge
Amen,
salary,
sister.
but I just want to be making a salary.
It's recorded
Okay, so
here,
on
we're
that
gonna.
note, well, I was going to say, give us a quick pitch on Fluency and where people can find you so we can help you achieve this goal.
Amazing. Fluency helps uncover partner referral revenue from everyday conversations. So what we do is we help tech companies to identify the keywords that if they were able to sit on every one of their partners' customer calls to be able to say, that's me, right? As the customer is explaining the problem that they have, the partner says, oh, that's me. That's the thing that I solve. We're identifying those opportunities on behalf of the tech company so that they don't then have to be on every call. Like to your point of like partner enablement is so intensive. Good partner enablement absolutely is intensive and it does not scale well. But what we're trying to do is at least get that first hurdle of awareness taken care of by essentially being present on every one of those calls and identifying when the company is a good referral opportunity.
Love that.
Outstanding. So good.
Yeah. And you can
Check
find
it
me on
out.
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn literally all day, for better or for worse. And then my website is getfluency.com, FLUINCY. Thanks a lot for the person who took fluency.com with an E. But it is what it is. And so that's my company, getfluency.com. And you can book a demo on there, or you can just like hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm around.
Go book a demo, folks. Go do it. Jessie, this has been awesome. So great.
Oh,
Thank you so
such a
much for
fan.
jumping in and hanging out with us.
Yeah.
We're fans
We're
of you
such a
guys.
fan.
Yeah. This is almost as much fun as joining the Literal Scratch podcast, which was a blast. So,
Oh, this was just as much fun. Just
almost.
as much
It's
fun.
close. We'll take a close second. I'm okay with that. But but thank you. This has been wonderful. Look forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully down in Denver. Or actually, I'll see you here in Bozeman in like a month.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
No,
I think
I'll see you here.
we'll talk after the recording about like that possibility.
All righty. Well, I hope to see you soon. Thank you again for joining
sure.
us, and we'll see you next week, friends. Y'all be good out there.
there.